Hi there, it's Stephen Abatiell. This week, I took advantage of the warm temps and got out into the woods to see what spring was creating. To my delight, ramps, or wild leeks, are emerging from the hillsides. If you are lucky, you may see them coming to your farmer's market soon, and you can try your hand at a delicious ramp pesto. In honor of the start of spring foraging season, we're re-releasing one of my favorite episodes of Root Words, Foraging. I find a lot of rejuvenation and food from foraging, and would like to see the practice available to more people. If you are a landowner, please consider allowing people to access the land for hunting, fishing, foraging, and recreation. If someone comes to your door to ask permission, please be open to the conversation. There are some important things in life that cannot be found in a grocery store or pharmacy. And if you don't have a necessary reason, consider not posting your land. I hope you enjoy this episode, and thanks for listening. Welcome to Root Words, a podcast that explores agriculture and cooking's role in connecting us to our landscape and our communities. I'm Stephen Abatiell. Root Words is a collaboration between Vermont Farmers Food Center, Shrewsbury Agricultural Education and Arts Foundation, and many other community members. The project began in 2017 and was made possible by support from the National Endowment for the Humanities, as well as from this community. Throughout this podcast, you're going to be hearing stories from people around the Rutland County region in the heart of Vermont, a region rich in agriculture, family farms, a region that's a pastoral working landscape. These stories are going to be each little windows into what a regional food system really looks like on the community level. We're excited to introduce you to some passionate folks working with the land and with food and bringing communities together. So please pull up a chair and enjoy. Before there was home delivery, before there were supermarkets, before there was refrigeration, even before people cooked their food, people fed themselves and their families by foraging their landscape. Collecting food, medicine, or provisions from our environment is perhaps the closest we can get to our food source and the places we live. Much of the world continues a healthy relationship to their home through foraging, and even here in the U.S., foraging is having a re-emergence, spurred by revivals of tradition and quests for self-sufficiency and connection to one's landscape, even in urban environments. On this episode, I head into the woods with my brother Pete and connect with a few inspired foraging folks. Walter Collins?
I'm Walter Everett Collins IV, and we try to be fully self-sustainable. I mean, we like to know what we're eating, what we're putting into our bodies, and specifically, how it's grown, where it's grown, or how it's raised.
And Tina Picz.
Hi, so I'm Tina Picz, and I live in the Mad River Valley in Vermont, and I'm a food photographer and food stylist.
Vermont got a lot of rain this past spring, and that meant a lot of mushrooms. My mushroom knowledge was pretty limited until my brother Pete connected me with the Vermont Foragers group on Facebook, and we started going out to see our hunting grounds in a whole new way.
What do we just come upon up on this hilltop? Describe this place.
We found a nice little honey hole of black trumpets. A good spot to remember for next year. Perhaps even later this year, because it looks like they are continuously coming up.
Yeah, we probably walked... Oh yeah, you got a bucket. We probably walked... How what do you think distance-wise, where we're kind of finding a vein of these things scattered? A good... I mean, it's like 100-yard kind of patch, it seems like.
At least a good percentage. It wasn't very wide, though. It may have been 20 yards wide. And I'm looking down at my feet. Not anything usually more than, I don't know, maybe 10 yards out. And that's stretching it. Every once in a while I have to stop and look around and look at the trees, too, to see if anything cool is growing on them. It's definitely looking at the land in a different way.
The Vermont Foragers Group is a community of over 11,000 who share photos, identifying information, recipes, and fungi-related memes from time to time. With so many folks posting photos from their last forage, it's like a real-time phenological forecast, and you have a sense of what you might want to look for and learn more about on your next forage. Now, I wouldn't suggest eating a mushroom you found because someone on the internet told you to, but a good foraging community can get you in the right ballpark, so you can use your own observations and resources for identification.
Ooh, just saw a lot of yellow. Ooh, a lot of yellow. Oh, boy. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This looks good. This looks like a chanterelle patch. Nice. So exciting. Just find the forest productive here in end of July. I could see why this could be. I've only been out here about an hour. I can see that this could become addictive. It's a way of life. I'm like seeing a little flash of pattern or color, and I just want to go skipping off through the forest towards it.
Vermont Foragers Group moderator, Walter Collins, gave me a lot of guidance this past season, so I called him up to learn more about his foraging practice.
I'm Walter Everett Collins the fourth, and actually born and raised in the city. Well, I had a grandfather who lived in the country in Rehoboth, Massachusetts, and I'd spend a lot of time there. And he always had us in the woods. He'd always take us kids up in the woods, and he'd teach us, what we could eat, what we couldn't eat, from real basic mushrooms like black trumpets and chanterelles and porcinis. God, what else? Lobster mushrooms and turkey tails for teas and medicines and stuff like that. And, when I was a kid, I was really interested in it, and I just found it fascinating. And then, of course, as you grow up, you kind of, you fall out of that stuff for a while and you do this and that. But I know, when I started raising my family and everything like that, we wanted to get back to the land. Really, to be honest about it, it was after the financial collapse in 2008. And I seen what had happened to me and so many of my friends, and I wanted to change my life back around and wanted to start raising everything for myself so I didn't have to rely on anything and anybody, and got right back into it. I wasn't on the internet. I never really believed in it. I just barely got internet service just 5-6 years ago for my daughter for high school. And then I found Facebook, and I found these groups, and we made these groups up, and I've just dove right back in head first, just learning as much as I can, doing as much as we could for ourselves, and really, living off the land as much as possible.
So I found you through my experience with Vermont Foragers Facebook group, which I've learned a ton from this summer, spring and summer, and that's how I came across you and all the kind of mentorship it seems like you're giving in that group. So could you talk a little bit about like what that group is and what your role is?
Yeah. So when I discovered Vermont Foragers, it was pretty much kind of like what you're saying there. We were already doing stuff in the woods ourselves, of course, like we'd had been doing for the last decade. I mean, the group, I thought, even for me, was essential in helping me learn things I didn't know about it. Like aborted entelomas, like I had never really heard of those. Shrimp of the woods is their common name. And I became a part of the group as a moderator, and I truly try to spend as much time on there as I can. We have a very busy life as it is, but it's just very enjoyable. And I like the community because so many different groups, they take on a role. People get sarcastic with each other. I find Vermont Foragers to be a kind place and just a genuine spot. And I've gotten to meet so many people in everyday life, in real life, by coming up and visiting with us or saying hello, and, just getting to meet folks. But it pushes me even further to learn more and more, because I want to be as helpful as I can and informative as I can, when others ask questions. I think that all we can do every day is constantly learn. Anyone can benefit from being a member of Vermont Foragers. There's people there that can answer questions about West Coast mushrooms or Southern mushrooms or, even other countries. I'm pretty sure we have some members from, Europe and stuff like that. And they're always really informative. And some of the stuff they're used to eating over there is stuff that a lot of us wouldn't think of eating here. But they know how to process it. They know what to do. And it's just incredible. I love sharing recipes. I always have a little input. Of course, one of my go-tos is I just love deep fried mushrooms in any way, shape, or form. So I'm always advocating for that. But there's so many other ways to serve different mushrooms. Hericium species, they lend themselves really well to seafood dishes like crab cakes and stuff like that. And to be perfectly honest, if you made crab cakes with a Hericium coralloides or a Hericium erinaceus or an americanus, you'd be hard pressed to tell the difference from that and real seafood, which also leans it very beneficial to vegans and vegetarians because they can get those same flavors, without, going against what they love and what they do.
So to go back a bit, just what is foraging generally, and I guess what does it look like to you, or how do you personally forage?
So for me, I mean, foraging is all encompassing. It's it's sourcing your food from the wild, whether it be hunting or gathering, collecting. It's really all encompassing. It's just bringing more to the table without having to go to the grocery stores, really, to me.
Just can you list some of the stuff that you do with your family to provide?
Oh, gosh. So we try to be fully self-sustainable. We absolutely buy grain and feed for our animals. But for the last decade, especially, we've raised all the meat that we utilize in our house through, a sustainable homestead farm. The animals are born here, they're raised here, they're at the end result, they're slaughtered here. We can all of our vegetables, our fruits, our jellies, our pickles, all that stuff for the year. I mean, we like to know what we're eating, what we're putting into our bodies, and specifically, how it's grown, where it's grown, or how it's raised. Is all very important to us.
Foraging is interesting because it's always kind of tapped into the really direct kind of environment and weather patterns and what's going on right now. Could you just kind of do a little bit of description of kind of each kind of Vermont season of foraging? Like what is there in the different periods?
What's available at any given time?
Yeah.
So it really, it starts in spring, I would say. Ramp season is my absolute favorite. I will say that. I mean, we're blessed up here in early spring, so we'll be out, maple sugaring, and you'll be out there in the snow's knee deep when you start. And then by the time you're done sugaring, real early spring, when you're out there in the maple yards and especially in the right environments, you'll see they'll start popping up real early, man. And ramps are just delicious. But then, we get into the plant side of it. Oh, but there's just hundreds and thousands of medicinal plants out there. I mean, there's a use for everything really in the forest. Early spring, some of the first very common fungi we'll see would be Cereoporus squamossus, or also known as pheasant back mushrooms. Then you will see the Morchella species, the morels coming out. And then you also at that time have the Gyrometras, which a lot of people like to compare, or they commonly call false morels. It starts with those three predominantly in early spring, and then it slowly starts moving on into chanterelles and early spring oysters, pulmonaria species. Let me think. As the summer comes into swing, right around, late June, I would say the second to third week of June, we'll start seeing the chanterelles popping up everywhere, starting in southern Vermont. And you can kind of track your location through the group. If, say someone posts, say they post the first morel of the year, they could be lower, down in southern Vermont, and you kind of know, it's going to track its way up through as the weather comes up. My favorite time is late summer going into fall, because there's just everything. It's almost impossible to list. Around July 4th, you have your medicinals like Ganoderma tsugi, which is the reishi mushroom, or it's not true reishi, but it's our reishi in the north. That'll start popping out on hemlocks. The chanterelles will be in full flush. The russulas are starting to really grow, and then you got the lactarius species, the milk caps. Late summer, going into early fall is probably the most exciting time, because as you walk, you'll just see so much going on in the woods. And then as fall progresses and we start getting some cooler weather, which this year is a little weird, not having really even a frost to speak of up here yet. Then when you get into the oak stands, you get into the really popular, the hen of the woods, and you get, your chicken of the woods and all these. There's also, Berkeley polypores, black staining polypores. There's just so much out there. And even right now is a good time. I could walk up in my woods later, because today's our day off, and we'll go look at our hericium logs that we know where they are. Those are the white coral mushrooms, and they love this time of year also. And plants like raspberries and blueberries lend themselves to multiple different things. They both produce delicious fruits. But again, this time of year in the fall, when their leaves are changing red, their leaves are great for teas. So you'll pick the red leaves off the blueberries and the colored purplish leaves off the raspberries. You dry them out, and we make teas. Now, the blueberry leaf tea has actually been shown through the Food and Drug Administration to help with cognitive function in people with dementia and stuff like that. And then in winter, a lot of people, when the trees have lost all their leaves, that's when a lot of people like to go out and look for chaga, because it's a lot easier to see on the trees.
Something I've come across, though, especially with the mushrooms, people that haven't done it before are pretty reticent to even go out there and try and learn about them. And so what would you say, just if you could speak a bit to, I guess, culturally, like how we think about the safety of mushrooms and just safety in general when foraging? Like what should folks know?
I think that a touch of what people like to call mycophobia is a good thing. A slight fear. Now, I always tell people, don't be afraid, but being cautious is a great rule of thumb with anything, because I do find that people do fear the mushrooms, the fungi, more than they fear plants with getting sick and stuff. We'll see a lot of new members, handling mushrooms with gloves on, and people will tell them to wash their hands, which is always a good idea no matter what. But I think a touch of fear is good, but I think the most important thing you can do with identifying mushrooms, even if they're the simplest ones in the world, is to be sure. And when I say be sure, I don't even mean going on to our group and asking us what it is and getting an answer. After you get the answer, we don't like to say it's edible. I don't like to say it's edible unless it's truly a no-brainer and there's no other way for someone to be harmed. I like to give them a name and say, look it up, research it. You know what I'm saying? Make your own decisions. And even a good edible mushroom, this is a great example with me, for example, chicken of the woods, so Latipora species. I simply can't consume chicken of the woods. There's just nothing I can do. I've tried it a dozen ways, and each time I've gotten cramps and stomach hurt and stuff like that, whereas my whole family can eat them. They love them. So everybody's a little bit different. You don't know how you're going to react to something. So even with a great edible mushroom, I'd always like to say, eat a little teeny bit. You know what I'm saying? Say try an ounce of it, and then give yourself, 12 hours, see how your body reacts to it, because anyone can have an ill reaction. Anyone can.
Now, I just thinking about, a lot of folks getting into the forest to do this, to forage. I am interested in what are your thoughts, or like, I don't know, just thoughts on or like community guidelines on the well, the sustainability aspect of foraging.
So, so there's two whole schools here, man. Sustainability is the most essential thing. Now, I would say sustainability plays more a role in the harvesting of plants than fungi. Okay. So that's where if you just go down and pick plants and you're digging bulbs or you're taking fiddleheads, and instead of when you see a nice group of fiddleheads, say there's 6 little fiddleheads sitting there, take half or 30%, leave the other ones there to unfurl and build the energy back up in the crown for the next year. If you go there and you do what I've seen people do, is take a knife and cut everything off, that plant is not going to survive. No matter what anyone says, it's not going to survive. If you take all the ramps, and this is a huge one, if you pull all those ramp bulbs out of an area, they will not come back. A ramp takes a very long time to grow. It takes 5 to 7 years from seed to produce a sustainable bulb. And they reproduce by bulb division and seed drops. The seeds for these plants drop right onto the plant, so you'll find them in clumps. Mushrooms, on the other hand, run with a mycelium network. So the mycelium network is under, say it's in a log, it's in the cambium layer of the log, or in a hardwood log, it's in the heart, and it comes out through those cracks and branches. So by picking the fruit on a mushroom, you're only picking the fruit. The cambium, the mycelium, is going to refruit again the following year. Okay. Today, I see what happens when people, overtax an ecosystem for their own benefit, and it's not good. It doesn't help anything. You can get the same results, but it will take you longer just to do it sustainably. You can, instead of going into one spot, say it's an acre or 2 or 100 acres, which up here we have hundreds of acres of ramps right up the road from me. And if you go into an acre or 2 and you try and fill that bag as quickly as you can, so you can get out there and you can get to the cellar, you can get to market or the restaurant or whoever or whatever, you're doing damage. If you take your time, you see a clump of ramps, you take 30%. It's going to take you a little bit longer, but the end result is they're going to be there forever.
I guess one of my last questions on here is just kind of a general, like, what would you like anyone listening to this, right? It's kind of just a general sort of audience. What would you like folks to know about foraging and about the Vermont forest and landscape?
Well, the Vermont forest and landscape is changing, and it's terrifying. We're losing trees that are host trees, elms to Dutch elm disease. So morels predominantly, years and decades back, were found around elms. Of course, with the elms leaving, they're also found around ash trees, white ash, brown ash. They're also under attack from the emerald ash borer. So our forests are changing, and through logging and stuff like that, it's not always the best thing to do. I think anything people can do that like to forage, don't just forage, think about the future, spread seeds, plant trees. You can never plant too many trees. I hate to say this, become a member of the Arbor Day Foundation or whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. Just plant trees, think about the future, think about the landscape, be aware of your surroundings. To me, foraging is more than producing food. It's a way to get out, to explore, to see things you may not see every day. Picking a mushroom or a plant is the last thing on my mind when I leave for the day into the woods. It's really the adventure. It's what will we see? What will we come across? What kind of animals will we see today? I mean, you're sharing the woods with not only other people, hunters, trappers, fishermen, everyone's out there, especially this time of year right now. We have multiple seasons overlapping. We have the best time of the year to find Hericium, the best time of the year to find Grifola frondosa, which is hen of the woods. But we also have the best time of the year to hunt grouse and squirrel and white-tailed deer and black bear and moose season. And these are all together right now. So we're all out there. And I think it's good to be aware of your surroundings, to not just walk aimlessly, but to, when you're walking through the woods, to look in front of you, look above you, look into the trees, look below the trees, and see what's in front of you. Just don't get what I like to call, forager vision, which is when you're just staring at the ground right in front of where you're walking, looking for what you're looking for. Be aware of your surroundings, be aware of others that are in the woods with you, be safe. I think that's important. And even though our state doesn't require any type of safety clothing when you're out in the woods, I would like to say that if you're a hunter or a gatherer or anything, just to always remember that it's easier to see you if you have something bright on. If you're bringing your pets with you and your friends, put something bright on them so people can see them, so that they don't blend in. It's a great time of year. And it can be a dangerous time of year if you're not cautious.
Hunting and foraging for wild food really reveals the importance of access to land. Community gardens are a nice solution in towns for folks that might not have access to land or tools for growing their food. But deer need much more space, and a porcini needs specific wild conditions to grow. Alternative solutions for land access don't quite fit. We heard a little about the struggle for land access from Chief Don Stevens of the Nulhegan Band of the Abenaki in Episode 10, Indigenous Food Sovereignty in Vermont. For many Vermonters, land access is important for maintaining traditions and connecting to community and landscape, and for many, the access is out of reach. While researching this episode, I came across Tina Picz, a forager, food photographer, and food stylist in the Mad River Valley. Tina is raising the issues around who does and does not have access to land for food and medicine.
So what I'm learning is, for me, I'm Filipino American, I'm Asian American, and I don't know a lot of Asian Americans that forage, but I know they exist, but I don't personally know a lot of them. And I'm just starting to learn through the BIPOC community here in Vermont, just different people that are into it. So there's someone I follow online called Black Forager. She's really a huge inspiration for me and a lot of people. And really she gets into, speaking to land ownership and land stewardship and, land being stolen and just how that took us out of or away from being able to connect in that way. So I think there's so many times where people are like, oh, just stick with the food and stop talking about the politics of it. But for me, it really is a political thing. And I'm, as I'm learning so much right now about Black, Indigenous, and people of color and my own connection to my Asian American culture and, herbalism and things that I'm interested in that realm, I think people need to realize that foraging is for everyone and that everyone has the right to do it and that it was taken away from them. It was a right that was taken away.
Tina is a member of Vermont Relief Collective, a network by and for Black, Indigenous, and people of color advancing racial equity in land, environment, agriculture, and foodways. Like a mycelial network, groups like Vermont Foragers and Vermont Relief Collective are connecting lots of sources of energy, resources, and information in the area, enriching the landscape. We'll be connecting again with Tina Picz and more Vermont Relief Collective folks on future episodes of Root Words. This episode was produced by Stephen Abatiell. Special thanks to Walter Collins, Tina Picz, and the Vermont Foragers community for ID support and inspiration. To learn more, check out Vermont Foragers on Facebook and Tina Picz on Instagram at Vermont Food Photo. You can learn more about Vermont Relief Collective at www.vtrelief, spelled RELEAF, collective.org. For a real treat, and this is highly recommended, check out Alexis Nicole on Instagram or Facebook at Black Forager. Our musical themes are by the Salt Ash Serenaders. We are a project of the Vermont Farmers Food Center and SAGE. Thank you all for listening and for being a part of our local food system. We'll catch you next time on Root Words.